Hello, fools. I'm Jason Moser, analyst here with the Motley Fool, and I am very pleased to be joined today by the CEO of Twilio, Mr. Khozema Shipchandler. I've been told, Khozema, I can call you Ko, but welcome to the show.
Absolutely.
Thanks
Please
so much
do.
for being with us. I want to get started off here just with a quick description of Twilio, right? We look at Twilio, and our quick description of Twilio and our write-ups is it's a cloud-based communications company that enables developers to build, scale, and operate real-time customer engagement within software applications. Now, could you break that down for us? Like, what's a good example of how I, as a consumer, might engage with a Twilio-based service in the wild?
Yeah, first of all, Jason, thanks for having me. I would actually submit that if you're a consumer out there, that it would be virtually impossible to get through your day without experiencing Twilio in some way. You just probably wouldn't know it. Examples range from rideshare to ordering food online to getting, things delivered, whether it's groceries, whether it's food, whether it's home goods and things like that. It could be, booking a hotel room, booking a flight. So any can basically think of any kind of purchase interaction, whether it's with a financial institution, healthcare, retail, e-commerce, real estate. If there's a communications event that happens in between across text or email or a voice conversation, we are probably right in the middle of it, and you would experience us in that way. You just never know it because we're always kind of a behind the scenes operator. And the way that you said it is right. We really started out as a cloud communications platform company, but since then we've expanded into having this really rich data asset. As I'm sure we'll talk about during the course of this conversation, we obviously incorporate a lot of AI as well to be able to increasingly power better, smarter, and more personalized interactions like the ones that I just spoke of.
Absolutely, yeah. I do want to dig into AI and data. First off, that you're relatively new in the CEO role, right? You took over in January of 2024, but you've been with the company, I think, since 2018, if I'm not mistaken. Going from a founder-led culture to now, obviously it's a bit of a different change with the founder leader stepping aside and you taking over. But what do you think, going from a founder-led culture to now, what do you think has changed material about the company, or has it?
Yeah, I think there have been some pretty material changes. I mean, as you said, I have been with the company since 2018. I started as the CFO, became the COO before becoming CEO. As we went through the transition between my former boss, Jeff, and myself, I think we really went from a place in which the company was just starting in many cases. I'd really kind of refer to it almost as like a Twilio 1.0,
Yeah.
where Jeff had found this unbelievable product market fit along with his co-founders. We'd started to really scale the company. And as we went through the transition, I think what we realized is that we had this incredible scale, we had this incredible product market fit. We also had, quite a strong culture, but going forward, we were going to require a lot more financial discipline, a lot more operating rigor, a lot more innovation focus. The markets over the last 18 months or so, I mean, they've thrown a lot at us, but I think in spite of that, companies who exhibit those characteristics of discipline, rigor, and focus, they're going to get rewarded over the long term. And what does that practically mean? It means ensuring that you're able to grow at scale, but also do so with significant profitability and operating cash flow, while also at the same time ensuring that you're seeding a number of bets for the future so that you're really creating a durable franchise.
Yeah, well, you said it. You served all three main executive roles there at the company: CFO, COO, now CEO. Do you feel like that gives you a certain benefit of the doubt, or like a leadership currency? And if so, how has that shaped your ultimate vision of what this company can be?
I think it definitely comes with some advantages, but I mean, to your question, I think it gave me like the benefit of the doubt for like a day, maybe even less than that, maybe just a handful of hours. I mean, I think when you go through transitions like this, not just at Twilio, but I think at any company, there's sort of a sense of like, let's forget about the past and only think forward. And I think that's healthy, actually. And so I think that folks, they knew me, they recognized me inside the company, I think with respect to our investors as well. I had to get to know a lot of our customers. I think they were willing to give me the benefit of the doubt, given that Twilio had served them very, very well. But, look, I didn't come into the job with any preconceived notions. I certainly didn't expect that anybody would give me the benefit of the doubt, so to speak. I wanted to make sure that we earned the trust and the ongoing relationships with all of our stakeholder groups. That ranges from employees to customers to our board to communities at large, obviously our investors. And so you work hard at these things every single day, and I put in a lot of work to make sure that each of those constituencies can really trust Twilio to do right by them.
So your predecessor, Jeff Lawson, right? I think it's fair to say, he was co-founder of the company. I think it's fair to say he kind of prioritized growth at seemingly any cost almost, which worked until it didn't, right? And so your mandate, which I think you communicated very, very clearly when you took over, is profitable growth, which I think that's ultimately what investors want to see in it. And it seems like you are well on the way to really executing that. Beyond the initial cost cutting that comes with something like that, though, what are the specific operational levers that you can pull in order to drive that growth and durable margin expansion?
Yeah, I mean, you want to be careful, right? Like, I think that you don't want to just cut cost for the sake of it. I think what you want to figure out a way to do is to become more productive over time, right? Because if you're just cutting cost, you're not really making bets for the future either. And that just delays the problems for another day. And instead, I think what you want to be able to do, as I said a moment ago, is really create a durable franchise. And so we've tried to get as efficient as we possibly can, obviously delivering, high velocity when it comes to innovation, making sure that we're running the place well. I think what you've seen from us over the last 18 months or so is that we have been able to flatten out our costs. We've been able to flatten out our headcount. We've been able to bring, for example, our segment business from a money-losing business to one of profitability. The overall Twilio, we've brought it from what it was, kind of at the low point of being a single-digit growth company back to healthy double digits. We've been able to significantly increase the profitability of the company, and we're generating a ton of cash. Now, all of that also gives you a little bit of license because you want to take some of those dollars, reinvest them back into the future. And I think from our standpoint, we've never been innovating faster. We were really fortunate in being able to hire some great leaders, among them a really awesome head of R&D. She's made some really, really smart, focused bets. And, we just released our 400th patent a couple of months ago. And the number of features that we've been able to unleash over the last 12 months or so, it's been the highest in the history of the company. And so I think it's a matter of both balancing the things that you ought to do in the short term because they're good for running a business, but not losing sight of the long term because you want to hang around for a while.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing I noticed, I mean, you've really worked hard to bring that share-based compensation number down more in line with your peers. And it seems like it's working, but I wonder, because if I'm not mistaken, you are kind of relying more on cash incentive as opposed to stock-based incentive. But are you finding that it's more difficult to attract and retain talent in this environment?
Not really. We have some things going for us in that respect. So first of all, like we pay competitively.
Yeah.
And I think partly in response to a lot of feedback with respect to the mix of equity and cash, a lot of our employees, especially those that live in some higher cost cities, have been telling us for a while, like, wow, we'd really rather prefer kind of stable economics than sometimes the up and downs that come with a stock price that
Yeah.
is often out of the company's control. It just reacts to kind of what the market realities are. And so what we did implement in response to your question was a bonus scheme where our employees got to participate in a company-wide bonus that pays out at different levels based on where you are in the company. And, fortunately, the company did really well last year for everybody, both investors as well as employees. And that resulted in a pretty great outcome. Now, with respect to hiring and our ability to kind of retain talent more broadly, I think, again, we pay competitively, so I don't want to suggest that that's kind of been a negative for us. But on the flip side as well, I mean, we're a remote first company. I think when a lot of companies are really demanding that their employees come back to the office, we've gone in the opposite direction and we fully embraced remote work. We think it's a real advantage for the company. I acknowledge that it's got some downsides, but for us, it allows us to attract talent wherever we want in the world. It allows us to have a more kind of skilled, diverse workforce, which I think is really important. And, just making it really personal as it relates to my own staff. I mean, I have 3 members of my staff that I don't think I would have in the company today if we didn't have this remote first policy. Our chief marketing officer, the head of R&D, who I spoke of a moment ago, and our head of strategy and operations, they live in Phoenix, Seattle, and New York, respectively. And if I'd insisted that they come to San Francisco, they wouldn't be working here. So I think it's been a real advantage for us, and I'm really proud of the way in which we've embraced remote first work.
Yeah, that's we at the Motley Fool embraced remote first work as well, so we're a fully remote workforce now. And you're right. I mean, that has some challenges. I mean, there's some cultural challenges that come with that, but it keeps us very flexible, very nimble. So I can certainly understand where you're coming from there. Let's move on to AI, because that seems to be the topic of the last couple of years, really, for investors, for businesses alike. We know it's transforming customer engagement. And how are you integrating generative AI into your product suite?
I mean, we're integrating it big time, as you could probably imagine. I think just to maybe take a step back for a second, what's really important about Twilio is that we have this amazing communications set of capabilities, a world-class, market-leading platform. We have an awesome data platform, and that's a world-class platform. And before I get to AI, the marriage of communications events with contextual data, importantly, about consumers, on behalf of our customers, that really allows for messages to be much more personalized, whether it's voice, text, email, whatever the medium is. There's a number of other channels, obviously, all of which we support, that allow one of our customers to be able to reach their consumers and do it in a much more personalized, intimate, customer loyalty reinforcing way. So I think it really starts there. Now, when you layer in AI and like what some of these LLMs are able to do, it's just tremendously, tremendously powerful. I mean, the rate at which they're able to infer, drive compute, create outcomes is really, really powerful. But the reason that I kind of say it as a third thing is absolutely, we're leveraging the LLM technologies. Of course, we have a number of our own AI capabilities inside the company. But from our perspective, really communications and data are the stars of the show. And then what we'll do is we'll integrate into the AI capabilities, either that will suggest to our customers or that in many cases they'll offer up on their own because they've got pre-existing relationships or contracts, using that combination of communications plus contextual data plus trusted AI. That's what really drives the unlock for Twilio. And I say it that way because what our customers really care about is that the data that sits inside of their environments, that it fundamentally never leaves their environments. We often end up selling to the CISO of organizations, and they want that data to stay inside their data warehouse. And so being able to have data warehouse integrations, being able to have zero copy of data, but at the same time being able to integrate into any LLM, like that's really where magic gets unlocked. And we think we're just getting started in terms of some of the experiences that we're going to be able to create for our customers. Hyper personalization at scale, like that's kind of been thrown around as like very buzzwordy terminology for the better part of 10, 15 years. And I think we finally arrived at the moment where it's all possible, not just in that way, but across multiple sessions, across multiple channels. And I think really, really importantly, with this like notion of persistent customer memory, so that when you go back and interact, it's like the continuation of a long-term conversation, which I think is super exciting.
So speaking of customers, can you provide a specific customer success story where sort of AI-driven features created a clear competitive advantage in ROI?
Yeah, I'll give you an awesome one that's actually really a hard one as well. So there's an organization that we do business with called OMD. And I'm using this example because, in the world of healthcare, the first thing that you run up against is HIPAA, right? And clearly, healthcare providers care deeply about HIPAA because of the regulatory aspects of it, to be sure, but also the consumers that they interact with. They care a ton about privacy. And you want to make sure that great care is taken in when you're interacting with a patient, you're using data to be able to inform a better patient experience, but at the same time, you're making sure that that data is effectively made obsolete at the end of the conversation. And so what we've been able to do with OMD is basically help them create, using our conversation relay product, a voice AI assistant that their consumers can avail themselves of to be able to handle a patient call through virtual capabilities, get questions answered that involve like rich healthcare concerns. We use our segment capabilities, our data capabilities under the hood so that there is this persistence in terms of customer memory so that if a patient calls back, it doesn't feel like the first time that they've called all over again. It allows them to kind of navigate, what we've become used to, unfortunately, is like this endless menu of IVR menus and repetitive information. Like that's all gone. And it allows to the extent that a call has to escalate to a human agent because the problem can't get solved, they can now engage with a much richer, much deeper level of understanding with insight that they can now bring to the conversation. And what we're starting to see with OMD is that they've got a 60% lift in the self-serve capability to be able to actually resolve calls.
Wow.
They're able to drive the conclusion of these calls in less than a minute in many instances. If you just kind of consider the scale at which they operate, they estimate that by the year 2026, they'll have 55 million plus patient interactions happening in this way. And so I could have used an easy example. I thought I'd pick a hard one because I think it really goes to show, just how powerful this technology is. And if you can do it in healthcare, you can rapidly take it to things that are also hard, like financial services or insurance, real estate. And then it just makes the proof points when you go to retail and e-commerce and stuff like that, like really, really powerful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure it probably pushes those switching costs up in time as well. I mean, they just have no incentive really to leave you because of the personalization, the technology.
Yeah, but Jason, you don't want them to not want to leave because the switching cost is high. Like we all hate the lock-in effect, right? That software kind of comes with. You want them to fundamentally love it because the ROI is just so incredibly high. And I think, what this really allows us to do, we've always been a company that's been on the right side of ROI because we're usage based and we don't make money until customers experience revenue events. But like this really clearly puts you on the side of ROI where they can run their own math and make sure that they're getting value that is vastly compounded on top of what they're paying us for, which I think is really exciting.
Make your customers happy. I mean, that seems like a pretty winning strategy.
Indeed.
Now, back in May, you announced at your Twilio Signal conference a multi-year strategic partnership with Microsoft to accelerate the adoption of conversational AI solutions for your customers. Tell us a little bit about why investors should be excited about this deal.
Well, first of all, so just to give a little bit of color in terms of what we're going to do, the goal here is to jointly develop technology capabilities between the two firms. We're going to build them on Microsoft Azure Foundry, their AI platform. Mm-hmm. I think out of the gate, that signals to our customers that we're a very serious provider, that we intend to operate this stuff, not just at scale, which is kind of obvious, we already operate at scale, but with the best security and compliance capabilities that exist in the world. And so I think doing it with the likes of a Microsoft that also happens to have a distribution capability that's really unparalleled in technology kind of really speaks to the importance that we see this bringing. When we launched the partnership, that very same couple days, we actually launched products against that technology partnership. So we didn't want it to be kind of this Barney, you love me, I love you kind of thing. And similarly, at their conference, just coincidentally, it was 1 week later, and they launched product as well that they built with us. And so I think it's off to a great start. I think there's a number of different directions that both teams are really, really excited about taking it. I'd say in particular, we were super excited to be able to have an audience with Satya Nadella, whose time is obviously very precious, to
Hmm.
have him kind of virtually attend our Signal conference and engage in a dialogue with me. But I think even more relevant is the product teams at sort of the working level. They've been engaged really, really fulsomely. And the number of ideas that are getting kicked around is what probably gives me the most level of excitement in that.
Well, you recently noted in a call you see a total addressable market of $160 billion by 2028. And when we
Yeah.
think about Twilio in the context of around $5 billion in revenue today, right? I mean, that's an exciting proposition. So what is it that's driving that TAM, and ultimately how does Twilio capture more of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got like things happening at three different levels, right? So I think the first is that if you look at the individual products that we've got, whether it's kind of our core market of CPaaS or our other core market of CDP, those are growing markets unto themselves, right? So if we were just to operate in those kind of singular platform product areas, I think you'd see really, really significant growth in TAM just with those areas alone. I think what becomes then subsequently TAM expansive, so this is kind of the second thing, is when you pair communications plus data, you open up much richer channels, much richer capabilities for your customers to be able to engage their consumers with. And so I think that's incredibly exciting. And then, to maybe state the obvious, like at a third level, like AI kind of blows the doors open all over again. I mean, it allows you to
Yeah.
do things in a hyper personalized way, really at scale so that every single individual in the world can be uniquely addressed as a very, very unique customers based on their characteristics, needs, histories, what have you. And I think, given that we're in the very, very early innings of AI, perhaps even in batting practice, I think what that allows for is like rapidly expanding TAM as well. So you've got this kind of dynamic where it's core markets, us combining our core markets products, and then hyperscaling it with AI. Like there's just really everything's in front of us. And I think what is really exciting for us is like we're fundamentally like a platform company. And so you can always go more horizontally with your platform to continue opening up more TAM for your customers.
One dynamic of the business that I think is interesting from an investing perspective is that you interconnect with large service providers around the world to enable the use of your products over their networks, right? And I mean, to be clear, I think the business pays those providers in order to do that, which that seems to put some bargaining power in the hands of the providers. But you've historically worked very well together. What do you do to ensure that continues? And is that going to be a dynamic that will always exist for this business?
I don't think it always has to exist that way. I mean, I think that, the way that it works today, in large part, is there's a kind of terrestrial telco component that goes with it. I think the secret sauce is it's really, really complex, and so across the world, you end up having thousands of different telecommunications providers that we engage with across 150 plus different countries. The secret sauce of Twilio in some ways is abstracting complexity. I mean, no customer wants to deal with that level of complexity. In that complexity is also a really, really significant amount of diversification. And the bottom line is that in sort of the telco world in which you're interacting predominantly with voice and SMS, the unit costs are remarkably low. The technology is totally ubiquitous globally. And so that offers really attractive characteristics. I think also, there are real comparative advantages here, right? Like the telcos are really, really strong at what they do. I think they do a great job of really enforcing consumer responsibility and privacy and ensuring that actors that traffic data and communications through their networks are good actors. And so they're great at that. I think what we're great at is being an additive software layer on top of their network capabilities, and we do that in partnership with one another. We have awesome relationships with all of those thousands of different providers all over the world. We're very, very engaged actually at a national level with what many of the regulatory bodies so that we can help shape the way that regulation ends up unfolding and making sure that we're protecting consumers at the end of the day and making sure that they're not getting, spammed or robocalled. And then I think, you've also got a lot of emerging technologies, right? You've got things that do happen over internet protocol based technologies like WhatsApp is obviously incredibly exciting. I think Apple business messaging is really exciting. You've got, other technologies in different countries. For example, Line in Japan, I think is pretty cool. And then, of course, beyond that, you've got, some new players that are in satellite and stuff like that. And I think it's going to end up being a mix of different things. And I think what's tremendously exciting about that mix is that means that a company like Twilio is going to be able to avail themselves of every one of those channels, but meet the customer, meaning the consumer, where they are in terms of the channels that they prefer, when they prefer them, the kinds of data that they want to be utilized in those interactions. And so I don't actually view it as a threat at all. I view it quite the contrary as a major, major opportunity. And our ability to remove that complexity on behalf of our customers who are ultimately serving those consumers is incredibly powerful.
Well, you mentioned earlier in the interview the segment side of the business, which is brought up to profitability. And I think if I saw recently the call, you're going to be basically rolling all of that reporting into just one segment. The communications side of the business, that's really the cash cow today, at least. What do you consider to be the communications segment? What's that competitive advantage? Is it scale, or is it a superior developer experience and stickier product ecosystem?
Yeah, great question. So I think, first and foremost, one's ability to abstract complexity, kind of referring back to the prior answer, it's huge, right? Because kind of plowing forward here a little bit, like if you're in the developer experience and developers, they want something that's self-serve where they don't have to get on the phone with somebody. They want to be able to go to a console and get up and running, ideally within minutes. And if they've got to go figure out how telco works, if they've got to go figure out how to procure a phone number, if they've got to figure out what channel is most optimal and provides the highest ROI, if they've got to figure out what software to plug into, kind of their core need, the whole thing immediately falls apart. So I'd say, initially it's our ability to abstract complexity. I think subsequently it's making that developer experience super simple. I'd say after that, it's being able to handle days like Black Friday, Cyber Monday at mega scale when, every single operator in the world is trying to transact with their customers, being able to toggle the difference, and I'm literally saying this, between a handful of seconds and microseconds. Like that's the difference between one customer getting a deal done or not and the other customer, not minding because the nature of what they're sending could be promotional and doesn't involve like sort of a high risk transaction. And so being able to do all of that at once, which ultimately is scale and resiliency, like that really matters. And our customers trust us to be able to handle that total life cycle. And look, they're continuously testing us. They're constantly pushing the limits. We encourage that because it makes us fundamentally better. And, the most awesome thing that I get to do all day long, besides interacting with our employees, is interacting with our customers who are constantly showing us new and novel ways in which they can use our technology, push the boundary limits, and force us to innovate in ways sometimes that we had foreseen, and in many, many other ways that we didn't see coming, but is equally exciting.
Well, before we wrap things up, I just wanted to see what's an initiative at the company that has you really excited these days?
I think the most exciting thing from our perspective is that we really have the opportunity in the age of AI to become the customer experience layer of the internet. And just to maybe take a step back for a second, I think that going forward, every single company globally, they already use a cloud communications provider for the most part. They already use a data warehouse for the most part. Increasingly, all of these companies are going to utilize different kinds of AI capabilities. And in that technology stack is going to reside a customer experience layer, because every single customer interaction requires a communications event in some way. And increasingly, to be relevant in this new world, you're going to have to use contextual data in which it's evident that you know the details of your consumers so that you can ultimately serve them better and create more loyalty. And that's the infrastructure and the platform that we're building out. I think that's incredibly exciting. It allows us to go in a number of different directions over time as well, continuing to provide new tools, new infrastructure for developers that's super, super simple to use, equally compelling, allows their businesses to scale up. And ultimately, we want to be the company that our customers are building against for years and years to come. And so when we reveal product roadmap, we're really trying to signal to customers that for the next 3 to 5 years, they've got nothing to worry about. We're here to hear what their new insights are, what their new, kind of nods are, what the new things that they want to push us on are, so that we can develop the next 5 to 7 to 10 years of new technology. But really creating that customer experience layer is what gets me most excited, and I think we have a real opportunity here.
Well, we'll leave it there. He's the CEO of Twilio, Mr. Khozema Shipchandler. Ko, thanks again so much for your time today.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.